Today we are going to be talking about pivot tables, which is a nice way to take a large set of data that you might have and just kind of summarize it quickly, get some, addition calculations done, some averages, some counts of different data that you've got in generally a large data set, but you can do it with really anything where you've just got sort of rows and columns of data. And the nice thing is we've talked before about some of those formulas like sum and count and average and different ways to break apart lists and such. But with a pivot table, you really don't need any formulas at all. It's going to be able to sort of take a look at your data and summarize it pretty quickly for you without actually typing in any of that kind of function formula type stuff. So that's what's kind of nice about it that way. So if I start sharing my screen here, do it this way, here and then here. And I got a couple windows going here. So there's my data. Oh, there's my data. I'm going to give you guys that address that I suggested earlier here, and I'm going to have a version of this up on our doc as well so that you guys can get to it again later. Copy, here we go. So by doing it this way, by adding the word copy in there instead of the word edit, what I'm about to give you is going to essentially force you to have your own copy of this particular sheet. And that way you'll be able to make as many copies as you want, really. If you wanted to, you can back it up, you can do a bunch of different things with it that way, and then keep on working away. So you won't actually be messing with what I'm working with. Instead, what happens is you get this screen here, and I'm going to make my own copy as well so the original doesn't get mucked up. I'll say copy, and I'll be given my own version of this file. So it's called copy of fake data. And that way it'll actually land in my drive, and I'll be messing around with my own version. It won't mess up with what you guys are creating your own copy of. But what we're looking at here is a bunch of made-up data that I've used for some other lessons before, whether it's different charts and formulas and some of that other stuff that we've done in the past on Tech Talk. But my fake data consists of some names, some email addresses, some birthdays, addresses, and then I made up some awards and some track and field events that people have registered for. So those are the two columns that we're going to be sort of working with, I guess, in terms of our pivot here. So when I jump to Pivot Awards, and I'm even going to double check our meet here just to see that, yeah, my mic is working. Once we get that copy, we can, yes, you can definitely rename your version. It's not a shared collaborative version of the file, Naomi, so you guys can rename it, you can work on it, you can mess it up and do anything you might want to do to it, and you're not going to hurt my version or the version that other people are using. You're all getting your own individual copy. So yeah, I can add them. Sorry, stumbling over my words. Yes, I can absolutely add that link again, because one thing about Google Meet, if people didn't know, yeah, exactly. You came in slightly late. Anybody who comes in afterwards doesn't see anything that's in the chat previous to them entering the room. So I'll repost that link a few times. If anybody jumps in here and doesn't have that link, let me know, and I will just add that to the chat again for you guys. So I'll jump back to my data here for a second, and I've included these little boxes, these little text boxes basically on the sheet here so that you have some instructions or some idea about what we're going to do as we do it. Once you've created what you need on the sheet here and messed around, you can feel free to delete those if they're in the way, or shrink them down to size, or move them off to the side, whatever you want to do that way. It's no big deal. And that way, you'll be able to see everything that you want to see here. So the first question I decided we would ask is how many of each award were won by each city? And when I come back and look at my fake data here, I've got all these different names. I've thrown in some cities, and then of course a bunch of different awards that do repeat themselves. So, a bunch of people are going to get a math award, and a bunch of people are going to get a history award. And so the way to kick this off, I'm going to start on my fake data tab here where I'm looking at all that data, and I'm going to choose on the insert menu. I have the option here for a pivot table. So I click on pivot table, and it immediately looks at the range of data that I currently have in front of me. So the fake data sheet is going from A1 down to M186, which is all of my data. So it's just recognizing all the data here, which is why it's important not to have like empty rows in your data. Don't create empty spaces just for sort of visual spacing, because then when data ranges start being grabbed, it thinks the data stops as soon as it hits an empty row. It won't necessarily grab all of the data you want it to, and then you're clicking this button and you're having to manually select data, or you're removing some of those blank rows. So when we're dealing with data and we're going to be calculating things and summarizing and formulas and anything else really, we want to avoid empty rows especially. Now, depending on how this was collected, if it was collected in, say, like a Google form, which is a great way to collect data, there won't be any empty rows. It's just going to add new data row by row by row as things happen here. So below this, below the data range option, I have one question to answer essentially. It says insert to either a new sheet or an existing sheet. Well, I'm actually going to say an existing sheet, and I'm going to choose my pivot awards here because that's where I want to do this. So I'm going to click, and I want to click right here on A1 of my pivot awards so that that's where this first pivot table gets added. Now that's partly because I had this sheet ready and waiting for us. You could certainly just create new sheets if you wanted to, but essentially when it says location, it just wants me to pick a cell where this pivot table is going to actually get dropped. And I'll say okay, and now I can see there on that existing sheet is where it's going to pop in. So if this was, again, a brand new bit of data that you hadn't worked with before and it didn't have set up, you could certainly say new sheet, and it would just create a brand new sheet at the bottom here for you, a brand new tab. But I'm going to say create. And once I do that, here, I'll move this guy just down a little bit out of the way. What I get on the right side here is some suggested options. And then I see some different categories here, different sections that I'm going to be dragging things into here. So rows, columns, values, and filters. Down the very right side, I start seeing all of these individual options here. These are all the different columns that I have over on my fake data tab. So it's all the same stuff, the student number and the full name and the email and all that stuff. And as I drag these different elements under these different sections here, I'm going to start seeing things happen on my spreadsheet. So let me just pop back and make sure there aren't any questions here I'm missing. You guys look okay? All right. So what was my question here? How many of each award were won by each city? So under rows, I'm going to go ahead and grab my different awards for a second. Just drag that under rows and drop it there. Okay. Now, if I'm doing how many of each award, I've already kind of put it in the wrong spot, and that's fine. That was kind of on purpose. Because if I'm saying how many, that's something I want to be counting. And you don't really count under the rows section here. The counting happens under the word values right here. So I'm going to just click this award and drag it straight down. And that's why I sort of messed it up on purpose. It's easy to fix. So I'm going to drop that under values for a second. And since I want to know how many per city, I'm going to take the city and put that under rows, and you'll see what happens. Boop. All right, so I'm seeing now of the awards, Bracebridge is going to get 39 awards, Halliburton's going to get 29, Huntsville 22, and then 42, 19, 16, 18. So now I know how many awards are going to each city. Well, I mean, that's somewhat useful. Maybe I want to know how, or which awards I should say, are going to be in each particular city. So I'm going to take, as it said here, I'm going to put, let's see, I've got city in the row section. I'm going to grab awards again and drag that over to rows as well. Because you're not limited to just one item. So now you can see under rows, I've got city, and then I've got award. And then down below that, under values, I've also got the awards. Now the difference is that in the rows, it's just being sorted here by ascending order, whereas under values, it's actually showing me the little formula that it's using, which is count A, which is just a simple little count function that you can use in your spreadsheets at any time, really, and give it a certain range. But because we're using the pivot table, I didn't have to know that or type that or do anything with it, really. It just dropped that in there automatically. And now I look at my table that I've got over here, and I can see not only is Bracebridge still getting their 39 awards, but I can see exactly how many of each are going to go to Bracebridge. And one really nice option they give us here is this little plus minus option I see right beside the word city at the moment. I can hit that and collapse this. And I can collapse the next one and the next one. Maybe I'm not interested in those first three. I was interested in seeing Lindsay's information here. And now I can see exactly which awards and how many of each of them Lindsay's going to be getting. And so here it says, all right, well, how many cities won dance awards? Well, that's going to be a bit of a pain because I'd have to go through each one of these guys and tally up all the dance awards. I don't want to have to do that. So what I'm actually going to do is just swap these around. So as I come up to the rows section here where I first see city and then award, I'm actually just going to drag these into the opposite order. So I'm going to drag award above the word city. Kablam. And now it has got my awards broken down per city. And since my question happened to be how many cities won dance awards, I can simply look at dance and go, all right, well, there's 3 cities right there, and Bracebridge got 6, Lindsay 12, and Omimi 2. So I'm able to answer those kinds of questions based on potentially a very large set of data um, without, again, having to know any formulas at all. We're just letting the pivot table do the work for us because of the values here. It's just counting up how many times it saw the word dance under the Bracebridge section there. Double check our meeting. We're still okay over here, no worries. All right. I'm going to give you a minute to mess around with some of that and come back and forth and just see how I did that. So again, I've got rows, or I have the awards in there and the city in there, and I'm just grabbing them from the right side column and just dragging them right over to where it says rows. Technically, I could also, beside the word roads, hit the word add, and it gives me that same list again. So if I prefer to do it that way, that's totally okay. And then down here under values, it's currently counting because that's the only thing it would really be able to do with text values. If there was number values in there, if we're dealing with scores or sales figures or something, then things like average or sum, those might make a bit more sense depending on what kind of answers I was trying to come up with here. Another way to orient this while we're looking at it, I haven't put anything in the columns section here. So what columns will do is, of course, just fill across all of these different columns with whatever I put in there. So maybe I want to take city. I'll do city. I'll try city just to show you what it would look like. I'm going to grab city and drop it down under columns. And you'll see it breaks things down a little bit differently again. Now I'm still going to see the total for the cities here underneath each of them. So I can see again, Bracebridge got 39 and 29 and 22. And then for dance, I can see across the row here how they all worked out. So it's not quite as condensed when I start stretching things out across columns, but it depends on what kind of answers you want, what kind of information you're attempting to answer. As I scroll across, I still get those same answers. So if I want to know the total dance awards, I still see that that's 20. Now, what would it look like? I'm just going to really mess this up by dragging city on the row again so I get both. Yeah, okay. So that took it out of columns because it just wouldn't make any sense to do both. So it depends on what kind of data you're looking at and how you need to display it and where you want your totals, how you're going to end up putting some of this stuff together. So I'm going to go now and look at our next tab at the bottom here that says Pivot T and F, which is just track and field, because I've got some track and field events in there. So the idea was that students have, say, registered for some upcoming track and field event, and what events does each student want to compete in? Well, the questions I'm going to try and answer are going to be how many students are registered from each city, how many per event in each city, and then how many total. So again, I'll come back to fake data for a moment. and I need to insert that pivot table again onto that sheet. So I'm going to say insert pivot table. And again, I didn't have to select any specific data. It just looks at where I currently am clicked on and sort of extrapolates out from there all the connecting data that might be there. And again, it gets from A1 all the way to M186. I'm going to choose existing sheet again, and I'll click the little grid icon here that shows up that says select your data range. And that way I don't have to actually type a sheet name. And this works the same way for functions and formulas. I don't necessarily want to have to type out the name of the sheet. I want to click that, and then I can just click on this sheet that I'm planning to use, and I'll click right on A1 where I want this pivot table to start, and it types all that in there for me perfectly. I don't have to worry about where do I put my little single quote marks, and did I remember to use the exclamation mark, or any of that kind of stuff. It just takes care of it. And I can say OK. And create. Perfect. Now, one thing it does start doing here is under the suggested option, it will try and give you some suggestions of things that maybe it thinks you might want to look at. Some of them might make sense and some of them won't. So let's see, count full name for each award. Well, what that's going to do is count. Here, I'll just click it and show you what it does. It grabbed the award data and started dropping some of those counts in there. But of course, I want to be looking at track and field data this time. So that's not very useful to me. I'm just going to get that out of there. What else is under suggested here? Number of unique last names for each track and field event. Okay, so that's essentially going to be able to give me how many people were registered for each track and field event. So there, where I said how many are registered in each city, that wasn't one of my questions, but how many, well, it wasn't even one of my questions, how many per event. So their suggestion there didn't really tell me, except for, I guess, the total each event. That's what it did do, is what total students per event are registered there. So sometimes those suggested options are a great one to just click on and see if it doesn't, in fact, give you what you're looking for. I'm going to leave that one up there just to show you one other nice feature that we have here, in that I can create multiple pivot tables on one sheet. So I'll leave that there, and as soon as I click away from this data that's currently being pivoted, if I just click onto one of these empty cells, that pivot table stuff that was floating there on the right just disappears. I'm going to come back to fake data for a second and do this all over again. I'm going to go ahead and say insert pivot table, existing sheet. And this time when I come down to my track and field tab, I'm just going to click over a couple of columns. I'll leave C as a nice empty blank sort of buffer space there and click on D1. And I'm going to end up putting my new pivot table right there. So let's see, how many students from each city? Well, I'm definitely going to need city. I'll put that under rows. And where's my student? I'll use student number, or I could use full name because I need something unique. If I just grab, say, first name, and I had a bunch of kids with the same first name, it wouldn't quite count things correctly. So I'll use full name and drop that into my values here. So now I can see that there was 39 students in Bracebridge, 29 from Halliburton, 22 from Huntsville, and go down the list that way. Well, how many per event in each city? This is going to be a lot like what we just did with the awards. I'm going to grab the events here, or is it track and field, and put that in with rows as well. Get this out of the way. There we go. So now by having both city and the actual event both under rows, I'm able to break down exactly how many kids from Bracebridge are, say, are registered for high jump. And in this case, it looks like there's just the one. And now I can come down and take a look at what events are registered for Halliburton, Huntsville, Lindsay, Omimi, and all the way down my list. So let's see, what did I suggest here? City in the rows, events in the rows. We've just done that. how many total for each event? Well, we've got that right there as well. So it allows me to do both pivot tables, this simple one right here with that count, as well as the breakdown all in that same sheet. So I can get rid of this, but if I needed to then print this sheet so that all that information was available, that would be an easy thing to print. And all my data has been summarized for me. Now, before we leave, I said I wanted to sort of show you the same kind of stuff in Excel, so we'll repeat ourselves a little bit there. But one thing that I'll show you here that Sheets does have available to it, when I come back to that fake data tab for a second, when you've got a bunch of data in a spreadsheet, what Google Sheets tries to do now, again, sort of like that little suggested section when I fired up the pivot table, Sheets tries to give you a bunch of different suggestions of things that it can easily, quickly do for you with your data. So what you would look for is down in the very bottom right corner, you're going to see this green Explore button. Now that button's always there, but it's not always lit up. So if I just made like a new sheet here, say a blank one, I get this boring looking, nothing happening little symbol in the corner because there's no data for it to do anything with. So a blank sheet is not very useful to it. I'm just going to delete that thing. But whenever you see it lit up, like it is here for this one, don't be afraid to come down and click the Explore button in the lower right, because it's going to open up a panel and offer you a bunch of things. It even shows you some of the questions you might ask about this data, and it's going to sort of give you different answers, like counting the number of track and field events, I'm going to guess, or counting how many people are in each city. Well, if I just click that, it's going to start giving me some little answers here, basically a little pivot table, or a little chart that I can just insert um, right onto my sheets here. So let me go back for a moment and just see what options it's suggesting here. As I scroll down, there's some formatting choices. There's a pivot table here based on my awards. There's this analysis of track and field if I wanted to chart that. And I would just click this little button here that says Insert Chart if that's what I wanted to do. So since we're talking pivot tables today, I'm going to hover over this pivot table that it spit out for me and just click it. And again, I get the same kind of insert pivot table option. Where do you want to put this thing? Well, I'll go with new sheet since we're just messing around again here with something new and hit create. And it's going to create for me a brand new pivot table sheet down here at the bottom. Now mine's called pivot table 5 because I was messing around with the file already and have a bunch of pivot tables created. But you can rename that sheet down at the bottom to whatever makes the most sense for you. And once you look at that and say, all right, well now I know how many different awards I'm offering, but maybe I wanted to know more about, let's see, not country, city. We'll drop that city option in there again. And then the last option down this column, since this is here for me to mess with anyway, maybe for these different, awards that we give out at the school for these different, whether it's a subject area or extracurricular or something, maybe we assign these sort of awards on the month of their, well, if I look at their data, the month of their birth. We'll go with that since the date is sitting there. A way to do that is with our filter option we have at the bottom here. So I keep grabbing them from this list and dragging them. This time I'll go ahead and use the add button. So I'm going to click add and choose birthday. Well, right now it's showing everything. But what I can do is click that and say, all right, you know what? I only want, let's clear it, the birthdays in, well, February. Select those. Get out of the way. Say OK. And now it's only going to show me the people whose birthday is in February, and these are the different awards that I'll hand out in those different areas. So if city didn't make sense for that one, if I was only looking at a single school, maybe I get rid of that part. If this is sort of my own school data and we're going to award the February awards, whose birthday's in February, and we could hand out these particular awards based on that filter that I've just created. And then when I come back next month, I can click that. I'm going to clear the data and say, all right, March, M-A-R-C-H, Yeah, R. Select, okay, and now I've got some different ones. Now, in this case, I don't actually know who is getting those awards, so maybe I do need full name. Come over and grab that and just drop it under my rows here for me, and I'll be able to see exactly who's getting those different awards. Let's put award under column for a second, see what that looks like. It's a little messy, but it still works. There we go. There we go. That's a little cleaner. So just messing with the order. I went award and then full name, and then we're still filtering by, of course, the month that I chose. Values, I'll throw award in there as well. Perfect. Not that anybody would get multiple awards for the same thing in the same month, but this is all fake data anyway, so you never know what I've done to it. All right. So there is, basically that was just pointing out the fact that that explore button exists, and it's worth clicking on. It sometimes might not have exactly what you're looking for, but it'll get you started, and it'll show you what it can do, again, right out of the box without having to do anything. That explore button just lets you insert things right away. Now, one thing, let's see, a couple things we can do here in terms of jumping over to the Excel side of things and just sort of trying a couple of these again quickly before we wrap up and look at your questions and such, is when I look at any file in Google, whether it's a sheet or a document or a slideshow, I have the option to come to the File menu and come down to the version history. Let's see, I think my face might be in the way here. Let me just get out of your way. File and version history, and see the version history. What this does, if you've never looked at it, is gives you a listing on the far side of all the changes you've made to a document right from inception. So this could be 10 minutes old, or this could be 10 days or 10 months old. And it will show me all the different changes that I've made throughout this document. So I can bring it all the way back to when I first started here at 107, when I still just had 2 sheets without anything on them. And I could say restore this version, and it undoes everything that I just did. It gets me right back to my base copy that we began with, and I'd be able to sort of go through the exercise and start over from scratch. That's not what I want. So I'm going to do that now because I want to download the Excel version and not have anything else going on. But I suppose as I say that, I don't have to. I could take it just as it is because all we're going to pivot is this main data. And I'll just get rid of these. So let me get this as an Excel copy here. All I'm going to do is say File, Download, Excel. So if there's ever any spreadsheets in Google that you know you want to work with as an Excel file, you can absolutely do that very, very quickly by just downloading it to Excel. And that drops down here. I see it on my little downloads bar at the bottom, and I'm going to click on it, and it's immediately going to open up the same stuff in Excel for me. I'll show you where it's kind of similar and different at the same time. Let's give that a moment. Slowly but surely, I'll double check and see how our chat's doing in case there's anything in there that I need to double check on. Can you add the fake data link again? You bet. Before it's done. Yep, I could do that. I'll do that right now for you, Christy. Copy. There we go. And of course, I'll be posting all that stuff on Tech Talk as well. It'll be on our doc. You'll be able to find it all. All right. So anytime you download a file from the web, you're going to see this protected view option, even when it's just your own stuff and there's nothing really to protect. Microsoft does that now. So click Enable Editing. And in this case, I don't want any of the stuff I was previously messing around with. I'm just going to right click on these and hit delete. Now it's kind of giving it away, showing you what it looks like, but I want to start from scratch here with Excel. So I'm still going to just come over here and highlight and delete. Highlight and delete. There we go. All right. So same problem. I'm still going to go ahead and make a pivot table. In Excel, I'm going to start still from my fake data sheet here, and I come up to the Insert menu, and the very first button I see here is Pivot Table. So I can click it, and almost identical. It says, all right, I see all your data. This is the section of data that I'm going to grab. Where do you want to put it? And I'm going to go with a new worksheet. I could go with existing, of course, so let me click that. And I click this little arrow, so it's a slightly different symbol than what we see over on Google, but it's going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to click it, and now it just wants me to click wherever I want this to go. So I'm going to go to Awards, A1, come click this button again, and I'm ready to say OK. Get him out of the way. In Excel, it'll show me this if I haven't done anything with that pivot area, and then as soon as I click it, I get all these tools popping up over on the side here. So where Sheets had it set up with the rows and the columns and the values and the filters sort of vertically listed, here in Excel they give us these 4 boxes instead. So I can still just drag things into there. So if I wanted to put awards, where's awards? Awards into the rows, I can drag it down there. I can grab city and drag it down there as well. And again, I'll take awards and drag him over to the values section at the same time so that I get that counting up. So again, I can have these in both spots and it's fine. Since I mentioned the awards given out on particular months, I can do the same thing again here with this filter option. There's one thing that Excel does nicely here that it'd be kind of nice if Sheets did, but it's just not quite how it works it. I'm going to find that birthday option. I grab it and drag it into filters. And what Excel does is it just inserted this extra couple rows, basically. It pushed my pivot table down a little bit, and now my filter option is right here. Now I could, let's see, yeah, I can click here and go into field settings and mess around a little bit, but in terms of actually setting up the filter, it's really easy to just click right here and say, okay, I want to be able to select multiple items here. Let me unselect them for a sec, and just like before, I'll go February, FEB, there we go, February, say OK, and now I'm seeing just the February data, or the February birthdays in my case, in terms of what's going on there. So I like that Excel shows you the filter right here as part of the actual data. It's not, I mean, it says multiple items. It's not showing me what they are per se, but just the simple fact that it's being filtered shows up here. And in that case would be, say, printable, if I was going to print this data somewhere. Whereas the Sheets option, it would show it over on the sidebar, but it didn't actually show on screen that I was actually filtering something. So I kind of actually like that with Excel. And similarly for our track and field stuff, I'm going to be able to go to fake data, say insert, pivot table, existing worksheet, and I'm going to click that arrow again and say, you know what, I want this to go over here on this pivot track and field sheet that I already had ready to go. Click it and OK. I would say 99.9% of the time you can just say make a new sheet and it's going to make a new tab at the bottom and start your pivot there. Part of the main reason, I'd say like the vast majority of the reason that we're going with sheets that I already created is simply because I put these little questions on those sheets already. So they're sitting there waiting for you. So how many students are registered in each city? Well, it says, let's try putting city into rows. Let's put events or track and field, which is the last one, down into rows as well. And then I'll grab them one more time and put track and field under values. Perfect. Now let's see, can I even filter based on track and field? Can I grab that into the filter and say, you know what? Oh no, I took it out of there. Okay, I was going to say, let's see if I can filter by just a particular event type, but I guess it's not going to let me do that. So instead I'll do it this way. And then if I want to see the 100-meter run, I can. And it is still giving me my total, so that's still an option there as well. There, I can hit this little plus minus again if it lets me put my mouse there. There we go. And I can just collapse these different sections if that's what I was interested in. Just depends on what kind of questions you're trying to answer. Yeah, okay, good. Similarly, because I don't want to short sell Excel here, where I had that fancy explore button in Sheets, and that will try and generate a chart for you or a pivot table or just answer some kind of question with a simple little count formula. Here, when I go to insert and I'm looking at pivot tables, you'll notice right next to the pivot table button, there's recommended pivot tables. So that's Excel trying to do the same kind of thing that Sheets was doing. It's going to suggest a pivot table based on what it sees here that it thinks you might want to use. So if I click that, it's going to pop up and give me a few samples here. Okay, so one of them is the count of student number, so how many students per city. So basically it's just going to tell me how many students per city, and it gives me that little sample right there. And that might be a good place to start. It'll do count, let's see, student number by awards, so same idea. How many awards am I going to be handing out? The next one it shows is count of student number by track and field event. Plus, I can't actually read the rest of it. Let's see. Oh, graduation. So it's taking the graduation field, which just had a date in it, and tallying up how many there are. Now, these numbers are going to be the same because they're all graduating the same date. There's nothing unique about that column. I really only put that in there to mess around with some like certificate type mail mergey stuff that we were messing around with. Not super relevant to this particular set of data. And what's this last one? That's one you would probably use here. The counting of the student number based on which events they're in. And if I were to expand that, will it show me? No, I'm going to have to insert it and see. Let's say OK. So brand new sheet. What are you tallying up here? Ah, all the individual people. So that's a handy one as well. I kept just using events, but maybe you want to know exactly who is registered for the 100 meters. And that's going to show you all those people right there. And then I can collapse that. Open up the steeplechase, and again, see who exactly is registered for that event. All right, let me just jump back to here for a moment, see if there's anything else that's popped up in the chat yet. No, and that's okay. I'm not shocked. There's a whole bunch going on with pivot tables, and this is why I wanted to try and keep today simple, because I have a habit of going too much all at once and doing too many things. But hopefully this way we're able to tell how, I mean, simple in the sense that, again, I don't need to know any functions or formulas to create any of this information, and I can quickly answer questions if somebody needs to know how many and who's registered for what, or how many awards are we handing out in this particular case. And your data is going to, of course, help you figure out what questions you're answering. It just depends on what sort of things you're working with. If you've exported something from PowerTeacher and you're trying to figure out how many students are in a certain grade or how many students are bust or not bust, or it all depends on the data you're able to pull, um, or whether or not, again, like I do a lot of the time, using a Google form to collect a lot of data and then start pivoting that to answer some questions about whatever it may have been that you were actually surveying, essentially. And as soon as I click away from that pivot table, just like over on Sheets, Excel will just hide all that pivot information again. So it's just completely out of the way. And if I click anywhere on it again, all of that just pops right back up, and I'm able to start manipulating things again and changing what goes where and seeing how I want to lay this out differently. All right, I'll stop sharing there and just come back to our chat options here and see if there was other things that people wanted me to sort of mess around with, or if that makes some sense, at least hopefully, for what we've got to work with there. You'll be able to always look at your own data, of course, and see what makes the most sense for what you're working with. Because it's hard to make it a universal answer when it comes to some of this stuff for all of it. But definitely just the ability to choose between whether or not it's counting up values, or if it's again test scores, you might be averaging those values. If it is registrations, you might be summing those values depending on whether or not it's names or actual data. Like how many, I don't know, I'd be making stuff up to say how many, but it all depends really on what exactly you're trying to answer. And I've said that a few times. There's not really a better way to say it. But pivot tables are certainly a very powerful way to quickly do a lot with big sets of data. You're not dragging formulas down hundreds or thousands of rows. You're not having to mess around with a lot of that extra kind of stuff. It just allows you to very quickly and simply uh, get what you need out of it and not have to sort of think too hard about all of that. So I'm going to stop my recording right about here.